Straight ahead on Law&Crime Daily, the Sandy Hook defamation trial.
After the shock of Ben's murder, the best way to describe it is we were like, I felt like I was underwater.
Emotional testimony from the families suing Alex Jones over comments he made after the 2012 Sandy Hook shooting. Plus, the defense begins presenting its case in the trial of Paul and Ruben Flores, 26 years after the disappearance of Kristin Smart. And ex-Minnesota cop Thomas Lane faces a judge for sentencing on state charges over his role in the 2020 death of George Floyd. Then later, the trial of George Wagner IV.
Could you see the condition of those bodies and the condition of the bed?
Yes.
And was that a pretty bloody scene?
It was.
An Ohio jury hears testimony about a second crime scene where two members of the Roden family were murdered. Law&Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law&Crime Daily. I'm your host, Brian Buckmeyer. Connecticut jurors hear powerful testimony from the parents of the victims of the 2012 Sandy Hook shooting, as several families sue InfoWars host and conspiracy theorist Alex Jones. This comes as part of one of 3 defamation trials against Jones. 15 plaintiffs filed lawsuits against him after he told his InfoWars audience that the school shooting was a hoax put on by crisis actors to push gun control. The plaintiffs, made up of family members of 8 of the students and staff killed and an FBI agent, say Jones's followers have harassed them and even made death threats. Jones has already been found liable for damages in this case, meaning jurors will only decide how much Jones should pay the families. Jones is expected to take the stand at some point in the case. On Wednesday morning, jurors heard from David Wheeler, the father of Benjamin Wheeler, a 6-year-old who was killed at the Sandy Hook Elementary School. He got emotional as he testified about a memory he has of his son. Then he was asked about what things were like after the shooting.
After the shock of Ben's murder, the best way to describe it is we were like, I felt like I was underwater. And I didn't know which way was up. And so you're grasping with that. You're trying to get your head around that. And to have someone publicly telling the world that it didn't happen and that you're a fraud and a phony is incredibly disorienting. It's like you're already fighting, and I could not understand why in the world anyone would think this. I couldn't figure it out.
At the lunch recess, Jones held a press conference outside the courthouse, telling reporters he's apologized dozens of times for his comments.
I have apologized for 6 years for anything that I did wrong questioning Sandy Hook. I didn't question Sandy Hook to be mean. I wasn't the leader of questioning Sandy Hook, but I did say things that were hurtful and not true, but I did not do it on purpose. I have a right to question something. Now, if that becomes hurtful to individuals and causes them pain, that is certainly a problem, and I have admitted to that. So that's where we stand. They are using this case to go after the First Amendment. Sandy Hook has been used to go after the Second Amendment and the right to keep and bear arms. Now it's being used to go after the First Amendment. I will not perjure myself. I didn't premeditatedly question Sandy Hook. I question everything.
Joining us today is former SWAT and Chicago area detective Lisa Lockwood and co-host Terry Austin. Lisa, everyone is awaiting Jones's testimony, but do you think anything he says on the stand can reduce how much he will owe these families?
If we're using Texas as an example where he got hit with nearly a $50 million payout, I would say no. What is he going to do differently? I'm sure his attorneys are going to try and reel him in to have him show some more remorse in all of this. But I think just him going outside the courtroom and pontificating and saying how much he apologized in the last 6 years. Well, guess what? This happened 10 years ago. So that means 4 years he was out there still perpetuating the falsehood. And I think they have enough evidence right now to show that once he knew, he did not dial back. Once he knew, he allegedly knew it was not a hoax, he never dialed back and the money continued to come in. So I don't see anything that he's going to say right now that's going to help him regarding his damages.
Yeah. Terry, Lisa brings up a good point looking at the Texas case, because in the Texas case, he did owe about $50 million. In Connecticut, he's being sued by multiple families, each with their own losses. We're hearing from these family members. So is it fair to assume that they may be awarded, I don't know, like $100 million in damages in this case?
Well, I expect that we're going to see a very large number, at least that large, and it could be even, multiples of that. You have the families of at least 4 children, a couple of educators, 1 first responder, and they were all harassed and threatened to varying degrees. The verdict form is going to include the names of all of those families, and it's going to have a place for them to fill in the amount. And it really does depend on how much they have suffered. And you heard David Wheeler in the stand today, one of the parents, and I do believe that he'll get one of the larger awards because he was threatened. He was one of the former actors that was targeted.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. We'll keep eyes on this case as it develops. And in New York, following a 3-year investigation, New York Attorney General Letitia James announces a $250 million civil suit against former President Donald Trump, his adult children, and the Trump Organization for what the state is calling a large-scale business fraud. James alleges in the new lawsuit that the Trumps grossly inflated the former president's net worth by billions of dollars. She says they cheated lenders and others with false and misleading financial statements. The suit also alleges more than 200 instances of fraud over a 10-year period. The suit also seeks to prohibit any of the Trumps from leading a company in the state of New York. At a press conference Wednesday morning, James said the former president's conduct cannot be brushed aside and dismissed as some sort of honest mistake.
This investigation revealed that Donald Trump engaged in years of illegal conduct to inflate his net worth, to deceive banks and the people of the great state of New York. Claiming you have money that you do not have does not amount to the art of the deal. It's the art of the steal. And there cannot be different rules for different people in this country or in this state. And former presidents are no different. And so today we are making good on that promise, on our commitment, because no one is above the law.
CNN reports former President Trump responded to Wednesday's announcement saying, quote, "Today's filing is neither focused on the facts nor the law. Rather, it is solely focused on advancing the Attorney General's political agenda. It is abundantly clear that the Attorney General's office has exceeded its statutory authority by prying into transactions where absolutely no wrongdoing has taken place." A suspect is in custody in Washington, D.C. after allegedly vandalizing the Washington Monument with red paint. Crews began cleaning up the paint early Wednesday morning, just hours after the incident late Tuesday night. U.S. Park Police say the treatment to clean the 134-year-old structure could take weeks and needed to happen immediately because of the porous surface of the marble. 44-year-old Sean Ray Deaton of Indiana was arrested and charged shortly after the incident. He is charged with trespassing, tampering, and vandalism and could face additional charges. An investigation is ongoing. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, one of the ex-officers charged in the death of George Floyd learns his fate. He's sentenced following a guilty plea to his state charges. But first, the state rests his case in the trial of Paul and Ruben Flores, as the father and son are tried for the 1996 disappearance and murder of Kristin Smart. Welcome back. The prosecution rested his case and the defense began calling witnesses Wednesday in the California trial of Paul and Ruben Flores, a father and son charged in the disappearance and death of Kristin Smart more than 25 years ago. The Cal Poly student went missing after a party in May of 1996. Paul and Ruben were long suspected in her disappearance, but were arrested just last year. Paul is charged with Smart's murder. His father, Ruben, is charged with accessory after the fact. for allegedly helping to hide the body by burying her in his backyard and later moving her remains. The case moved on to the defense calling its first witness Wednesday after their motion for a mistrial on Tuesday was denied by the judge. Paul's attorney argued there is no evidence linking his client to Kristin's murder. He apologized to Smart's family before implying Kristin could be in another country and not even dead. The defense's first witness called Wednesday is an expert in human decomposition. The trial is expected to last through next month. Terry, what was your takeaway from the fireworks that flew at the end of the prosecution's case? Who came out on top, the defense or prosecution?
Well, I think the prosecution came out on top. I think both sides made some points. Basically, the defense was trying to argue for this motion for dismissal, and we knew that wasn't going to happen. That's something that I think most defense attorneys are going to do no matter what. And this is a case where there's no body, so there's some chance that it could have prevailed. But at the end of the day, I think the prosecution ended up on top. They ended up getting in evidence that they wanted to get in that the defense thought was inflammatory, having to do with sex toys that were photographed. And so I do think that that jury is going to be, at this point, siding in favor of the prosecution.
Yeah. Now, Lisa, after the prosecution's case, were you left with any questions of the Flores' guilt that the defense may argue in their case?
Well, my thought on all of this is, how did they bring the case forward? And I have a different opinion than Terry, in that just because he was the last person with her, the fact that he had a black eye is circumstantial. It took them all the way until 2011 to actually get some pieces of what they thought was evidence. 18 search warrants came later, then accusations of rape from Paul, from 2 other women that came forward, and things were just not substantiated. So having the alerts of 2 cadaver dogs that the state put forward, none of that was able to prove any DNA. We don't have a body. We cannot prove a rape. So I think it's going to still be very hard for the jury to come to a guilty verdict.
All right, we'll see what the defense puts on. And of course, it's still up to summations. Those last and final arguments from either side. We'll keep eyes on this, the California v. Paul and Ruben Flores case. Then switching to Texas, where Houston police released dramatic body cam footage of a hostage situation that led to an officer shooting and killing the suspect. It happened last month in Splendora, Texas. Police say it all began Monday, August 22nd, when 52-year-old Melvin Porter held his ex-girlfriend hostage at gunpoint. She got away, but the next day, officials say Porter showed up at her work, then kidnapped and held one of her co-workers at gunpoint. Porter's ex-girlfriend reportedly made a deal with him to exchange herself for her co-worker. The ex-girlfriend got Porter to pull into a gas station. Officers surrounded the car, and what happened next was all caught on camera.
You okay? Yes. You're okay. You're all right.
Thank you.
You're okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're okay. You're okay. You're all right. You're all right. You're okay. You're okay. You're okay. You're okay.
Officers fatally shot Porter when they say he was reaching for what they believed was a weapon. Police did not release the woman's identity. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, the Pike County massacre. Jurors hear testimony about processing another crime scene after 8 members of one family were murdered in their beds. Plus, a former Minneapolis police officer is sentenced for his role in the death of George Floyd. Will he get more prison time at the state level? Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. We head now to Ohio for the trial of defendant George Wagner IV, where testimony shifts to a second crime scene where 2 of the 8 victims were killed in the Pike County massacre. Wagner, his brother Jacob, and their parents Angela and Billy are charged with murdering 8 members of the Roden and Gilley families in April of 2016. Prosecutors say the shooting deaths came amid a custody dispute involving a young child Jacob Wagner shared with Hannah Mae Roden. The victims were found dead in their homes. Most were shot as they slept. George argues he's not guilty because he didn't actually pull the trigger. Jurors are hearing about the murders one crime scene at a time. Wednesday, Bureau of Criminal Investigations agent Todd Fortner resumed testifying. He was part of the team which processed the crime scene where Frankie Roden and Hannah Hazel Gilley were killed. He described the scene as the jury was shown graphic photos.
When you peeked your head in, when you looked in that room, could you see the bodies in the bed?
Yes.
And could you see the condition of those bodies and the condition of the bed?
Yes.
And was that a pretty bloody scene?
It was. This is a photograph of Frankie and Hannah laying in bed. They appear to have gunshot wounds to the head. No other obvious wounds on their torso or any defensive type wounds. Also, a great deal of blood between them where the family indicates the infant was laying.
Did you also notice like smudging and smearing of blood on their body?
Yes, these are swipes and wipes on Hannah's body that indicate movement. And it would be consistent with an infant laying between them moving.
Lisa, we're hearing the culmination of this investigation while he's testifying on the stand, but especially with your background, can you break down what went into getting this information to us through this testimony?
Right. So obviously the person who's on the crime scene, the detective who's initially investigating it, you're going to do a peripheral look before you actually go inside and start collecting evidence. There's photographs that take place first. There's audio recordings, etc., and then to start to go forward. But the thing that I found interesting about this, not interesting, I should say, but tragic, is the fact that the live baby was left there flailing for itself and becoming engaged with the mother's blood from the head wounds. And it's very hard. And this officer was extremely professional in his testimony.
Absolutely. Now, Terry, is there some sort of trick to presenting a case with multiple victims in multiple locations, or is it just throw everything at the jury and hope that it sticks?
Well, the trick is to stay organized from the very beginning of the case. As far as the prosecution is concerned, I think the defense probably wants to confuse the jury and isn't going to be as organized. But I do think that because there are 8 victims and 4 defendants, and all of those individuals have extended family members, there should be an organizational chart with pictures, actually, of all of them so that the jury can follow and they don't have to question. And because there are 4 crime scenes, I definitely think that there should also be something demonstrative. It helps the jury to follow along when they can see in scene 1, this is the address, this is who was killed, these are the bullets, this is the gun that was used, these are the 2 guns that were used. So I definitely think that you have to keep track of all of the facts, and you have to make it easy for that jury to follow along. And then the last thing, you have to go in chronological order, and I think the prosecution did do that.
I think it's going to be a very robust closing arguments for both sides. I can see that coming. Well, thank you, Terry and Lisa, and thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.